so busy in here.
Yeah.
Who can? All right. So anyway, should we do a wake up round?
Wake up the guys.
They're missing out. All right. So let's go back inside. Yesterday was a little bit for the newbies. So we're talking about the gematria on both sides, the klal, the prat, and the klal, the higher gematria and the lower gematria. The higher gematria is basically everything as it is in its source. So the gematria represents something which is above all the details, as it were. The lower gematria represents contracting something so that you wind up with just the end sort of lowest level of it, merely its number, and you sort of do away with all the details. And so we're trying to describe what it means sayag l'chochma shtika. So actually he's going for this idea of the higher gematria. And I guess the reason he went into this thing is because most of us Tanya readers are familiar with the idea that gematria is sort of is a condensing and a lowering of something, where he's now introduced this topic where chochma and sayag have the same gematria. Right? So he's trying to say that the sayag itself represents the gematria level of chochma, which is a higher level of chochma. That's why he had to go and sort of preface this thing by explaining that there is such a thing as gematria being a higher level of the thing. Right?
Yeah.
So the sayag, i.e. the gematria of the chochma, because sayag equals chochma, this represents a chochma in like a pre-stage. And
it's the cloud stage.
Right, before the chokhmah actually comes into its revealed state, which makes the regular chokhmah, like the station of chokhmah, that too turns into a chitzonius level of chokhmah compared to the sayag of chokhmah, which is shtika. We're not necessarily getting into shtika, but just the sayag of chokhmah. Meaning, again, I'll say that again. Before we said that there's two ways to look at what's called chitzonius of chokhmah. One is obvious, that when chokhmah goes into bina, so you're in the realm of bina, and therefore chokhmah's dwelling in bina, that's clearly the external aspect of chokhmah, which comes out of its place and goes down. But even chokhmah, so to speak, in its place, that's also called chitzonius of chokhmah, because that's not its real place. Its real place is the sayag of chokhmah, the gematria of the chokhmah, which is above the revealed state of chokhmah. And you can say that the revealed state of chokhmah is like the light that shines, which even though it's clear, it's still like expressed, and being expressed is already a certain state of leaving the source. So when it's unexpressed state, which is the sayag of chokhmah, right, the gematria of the chokhmah in its source, where before it shines, that's panemius chokhmah.
Right.
And therefore even the sphere of chokhmah per se in its regular place is also called chitzonius. You with me, Da'el?
That's chachma in the keter.
Sayag.
Sayag.
Seemingly, yeah. Okay, so now we're going to start off with page Reish Chaf Beis.
Reish Chaf Beis?
That's the one. Rechev. It's actually really interesting because he's going to talk about the Rechev in this os.
Did we get copies of that page yet?
Yes, you did. I gave them out.
Okay, I'll go.
Here, but David, I might have one here. No, I don't.
It's a car in modern Hebrew. It's a car.
Okay, so like the Merkava, chariot. We don't have any more. I don't have any more in this stack, but maybe they're lying around here. Maybe there's some over there. I see. We gave out a bunch of them. They're floating about.
Oh wow!
Look at that.
Basi Lagani and grade 2 English.
All right, so going on into these brackets, he says al derech she'os yud. We did this also, but we'll do it again. Al derech she'os yud shem havaya. Just the very top of the page, Reish Chaf Beis in the brackets. He says the letter yud in the name Havaya, Techila Shem Havaya, is the beginning of the name Havaya, right? He's going to give us like an example of this gematria, which is higher than the prat, so to speak. He says, so the first letter of Havaya, which is a Yud, is Gematria Eser. Right? It's 10. Yud equals 10. And why is that? Liyosu kolel kol daled osu shem Havaya im hamiiloi shelahem. Because that Yud basically contains all the 4 letters of Hashem's name plus their miiloi. What's the miiloi?
Oh, plus the spelled out of their...
The spelled out version.
Yeah.
So actually, if you look down, for example, at footnote number 99 real quick, although we're not up to that footnote, but just to give you an example, you see right there he spells out Yud K Vav K. So if you count the letters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the idea is that the Yud, which is the first letter, is the Gematria 10, which equals all the letters. Ki yadua shezeu biur hamaimer, that Rishus HaYachid rachbo daled v'gavo Yud. And this is the concept that Rishus HaYachid, we said this yesterday, the definition of a private domain in the midst of a public domain is something which is 4 amos wide and 10 tefachim high. So you get 4 by 10. And the idea is that Rachbo Dalid, who in Dalid Osio Shem Havaya, so the width of the Rishus HaYachid is 4, equaling the 4 letters of Hashem's name. The Gavo, and the Gavo, is the height of it, is Yud, Hainu Kefisha Dalid Osios, Hem Yachad Im Miiloi Shelahem. And what does it mean that it goes up 10? It means that the wholeness of the name, as it were, like what looks like sort of like a wide thing, it's just 4, its height, its fullness, its peak is really 10, because if inside that 4, there's really 10 letters.
Dimensions of what?
Of a Rishus HaYachid, of a private domain. So we're talking about the domains, mostly it comes in Shabbos laws. That you're not allowed to say carry something or throw something from a private domain to a public domain. And therefore they have to define the definition, since you can't go from a public domain to a private domain. So obviously like your house to the outside, but what's the minimum measure of what's called a private domain is something 4 amos by 10 tefachim. And the idea being is that that's really, what's that, Rishus HaYachid? It means the domain of one, which really is referring to God, right? In Hasidus language, the public domain represents like the klippas, and the private domain represents oneness of God. So you can't go from the Rishus HaRabbi to the Rishus HaYachid, it's all like a spiritual thing. But here we're saying even a deeper thing, in the midst of that deep thing, we're saying that the actual dimensions of Rishus HaYachid are defining the name Havaya. That it's 4 wide, so to speak, which is the 4 letters of Hashem's name, and then 10 high, which means like the real peak of it, the totality of it is all 10 letters which are inside of those 4. And what are we saying? That the Yud, therefore, which is the first letter of Hashem's name, is the Gematria of all that comes after it. So that indicates sort of like this higher order of Gematria. Sometimes the Gematria contains the predecessor and the root of the whole thing that's going to come after it, like this example. That you see that the first letter of Hashem's name, which is the highest letter, it already is the gematria of everything that's going to come later, because all the later details are already contained in their higher state inside of the original Yud. So that's like an example that he gives of this higher version of gematria. And now we can understand what he's getting to when he says that sayag equals chokhmah. So obviously we're talking about a heightened level of chokhmah. If we're dealing with it gematria, the sayag is the gematria of chokhmah, and we just basically are trying to produce a proof that gematrias are higher than the thing. So therefore the sayag, i.e. the gematria, is higher than the regular chokhmah. So sayag, there's chokhmah, there's sayag lechokhmah. So he's saying that the gematria of chokhmah. Shezeu ma she'akeser nimshach b'chokhmah. And what does this represent? It's the idea that the keser is being drawn down into the chokhmah. So again, we were calling it, or some were calling it like chokhmah of keser. It's not exactly chokhmah of keser. It's keser when it sort of dips down into chokhmah and shares its keserness with chokhmah. Upol ba bittul nai liyoser ma bittul shemitzad chokhmah atzma. and it affects a higher level of bittul than chokhmah would be able to achieve on its own. So like sort of this unshining light, which is like chokhmah in its source, as it is unshining, sort of a ray of that dips down into the light which is shining, and gives it a level of a boost which it would not be able to have on its own.
It's a ray of Kesser.
It's a ray of Kesser, basically.
Yud represents Hakma too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the same concept like when we do the Omer where it's Chesed of Gevora and then it's Gevora of Chesed, so which is sort of dominant bringing in. When it's Kesser being drawn into Hakma versus Hakma into Kesser.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah. This is like, I guess, Kesser of Chokhmah, as opposed to Chokhmah of Kesser. Yeah, that's a good man. So the point is just like we saw before, that Bina could have a ray of Chokhmah, right, which basically helped, it was like the point in the palace, we said. Mm-hmm. So too now, Chokhmah has a ray from Kesser that makes it be able to achieve its ultimate state of Bittul. Mm-hmm. And then L'mayla mizehu inyan ashtika. Above this is silence. So we got through saying sayag lechokhma shtika represents three levels. There's the chokhma, there's the sayag lechokhma, and there's shtika. So now we're holding by silence. So even above this level of the gematria of chokhma, which is sayag, there's now a level which is above that, which is called shtika. You follow?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Shezeu abitul de bechinas keser atzmo. That's already not chokhmah anymore. That's keser. And he says keser hu melashing keser li zeir. What's that? Ktarli, okay. Which means what exactly?
Wait for me a little bit.
So it's funny. I also thought that, and it seems to say that in the beginning of Ayin Base. But here he says hu inyan ashtika. It means silent.
Wait.
Wait, okay. Wait is not exactly silent, but it's like the idea of wait is that like something's coming later, but right now there's nothing to say. So that's where it kind of gets into like an Indian of silence.
Wait to talk.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Right? So where do we? So in other words, when we see that ktar, okay, that the word keser actually means wait, or wait in itself is sort of indicating silence. This is something which is completely beyond the level of light. So we said before that light, when it's not shining, is still called not shining light. It's light in its root, but it's still the inyan of light. It's just that it's not on. But this is going to a level of where it's completely beyond light. In other words, if you go into the essence, so the root of all light is inside the essence, fine. And in that state, when the light is inside the essence, it's not yet a shining light, but it's still the source of light inside the essence. But there's something which is beyond the source of light. In other words, the entire essence is not comprised and defined by the fact that it's merely called the source of light. That's just something that it has. But it's not only and exclusively called the source of light, it's also just the essence, right? And so that is a level which is, there's levels which are beyond light, even beyond the source of light inside the essence. And that's this inyan, what we're calling keser right now. Mm-hmm. It's the higher lagamri me'inyan ha'or. Lamai lagam ma'or kafishu kalul b'makoro b'ma'or. It's even above the light, as the light is included inside of its source in the luminary, as we said. V'lachein nema b'chinas ha'keser yoshes choshech sisro. And that's why it says, regarding this level of keser, it's called, he places darkness as his secret hiding place. We've talked about this level before. This is like the ultimate level, basically. That darkness is its name, which means it's like higher than light. It's higher even than the source of light. It's not just light off. It's something completely beyond the source of light.
So that's the highest level?
That's shtika. That's silence. That's the highest level. So you have three levels. Chokhmah, the sayag for chokhmah, and shtika. V'zeu tachlis shleimus habittul. And now you've gotten to the ultimate wholeness of bittul. So again, all this conversation was like a throwback to Malchus having this like ascending levels of nullification. That yud on the back of the dalid is its bittul, and it's not a static yud. Like you can keep going more and more and more and more bittul, because dalid is like the poverty of kedusha, which means you can make yourself poor to the point that you become completely disappear, and in place of your existence is the fullness of Hashem.
So poorness, bittul is poorness? Being poor is the equivalent of bittul?
Well, there's poorness of kedusha and there's poorness of klippa. So the poorness of kedusha has the yud, so that yud represents the bittul, and that's what makes it a kedusha dika poverty instead of just a regular poverty. A regular poverty that means that you don't have bittul.
This is a rage.
The rage, which means why are you poor? You could be rich even. But the idea is that you think everything's coming from yourself. Like you're not actually able to recognize that everything you're receiving is from above. So you're never really able to receive true divinity. In other words, you're only able to ever get like worldliness and a level of hishtalshalus where, it's from the hishtalshalus that you suddenly feel yourself to be an existence of a yesh.
It's more, is sort of poor or impoverished the right word? It's more like a nothingness, isn't it?
Which one?
For the daled.
Well, the word dal means poor in Hebrew. And sometimes it's used for just a poor, impoverished person. Right? Dalus is like a really poor person. Like it's used to mean poor. But the idea is that poor means you don't have anything. It doesn't necessarily mean you're like down and out. You could be happy. But it means you don't have anything. And the idea is you don't have anything in the Kedusha means you don't have anything of your own. Like you don't have anything. But it doesn't mean that you're not bearing somebody else's wealth, right? And like allowing that to come through you, I guess is the idea. I was thinking about also what we were talking about yesterday, like silence being this great virtue. Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned the idea of like nature is like silent, so to speak. But I was thinking about that a lot because there was a guy in the class who was like a meditator, and he's very into that kind of thing. But the truth is like, we have to put it together because obviously we're saying that silence is the ultimate, right? Shtika, complete silence, like there's no expression of self whatsoever, is the greatest level of bittul. But nonetheless, even if you want to say like follow nature and like just like sort of stop babbling around and just like be part of the oneness, what's the name of man, al pi Torah? Medaber. Like our nature is to speak. You know what I mean? So even if we're going to sort of be like totally at one with the universe, it doesn't mean we're going to be sitting there under a tree silent, Our nature is to speak. So how does it go together? It's like
use of words. It doesn't necessarily. It could be speaking with the mind or speaking with music or creativity. Using the words. That's the words are the building blocks, not necessarily always speech and talking a lot.
Well, dibur means speech. I mean, there is a word in Hebrew for thought, and there's a word for song, and there's a word, but we are called, right, a medaber, right, which means a speaker, and that's like our thing, hadeya v'adibur. It's like that's what separates us from, that's what makes us unique in our nature. But I agree with you. Like there's this idea of just like babbling, like the word babble comes from the word bavel, probably just like a confusion. But the idea being is that, how does it go together? Excuse me to cut you off. The idea being is that we want to be silent from, so to speak, our speech. In other words, the idea here of being silent doesn't mean being silent. It doesn't mean you're not talking. It means that God's talking. Moshe Rabbeinu is silent. He's the ultimate state of bittul, but he's like so kavad peh, right? He can't speak. And then meanwhile, the whole all speech is basically hit from him. The whole Torah is his speech, because it's HaShem's speech. That's the point. When we're saying we're to be silent, it means to silent yourself, to be poor in terms of your own existence. And that itself is what allows the higher existence to come through you. So if you were like a perfect man, look at the Rabbi, let's say. He's like our vision of a perfect man. I don't think anyone spoke in their life more than him. He's just like speaking. He's like a fountain of speech. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, like recorded only. I'm saying besides what we don't have recorded, just going like a motor, you know what I mean? And that's the perfect man, in other words, because it's not his own speech. It's just like a flow of divine speech. It's also called silence. That's called silence. Mitzad himself, he's silenced himself to the point that he's like totally communing with his proper nature, and he's like not disturbing the nature of reality, and that looks like speech. That's why our religion doesn't have us sitting under trees all that often. Even when we're meditating, we're like, is that there's a mitzvah of Talmud Torah is with dibur. You have to speak like when you're learning. If you're not learning, it's like chaval azman for you because you could chap another mitzvah by saying it. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. It doesn't negate the concept of silence. Our own Torah tells us that shtika. Even the Amida, you're moving your mouth. Exactly. It's I was thinking that. That our moment of silence is speaking quietly.
It's funny that we were talking about before you came in. We were talking about silence, and we were saying that like it's possible that silence can be like a double-edged sword. Meaning, it could be the highest thing, like two people like having a moment of silence together could be like the closest they ever felt together, and also could be like the biggest tension. It's like you come into a silent room and you can feel tension. So it's interesting how high or how low it could be. It could be the best thing in the world. It could be the worst thing in the world. You know?
I think what it is it's exactly what it says here, and he's not getting into it. Like when he says "ktarli zair" in the ayin base, where he like gets into this whole thing of Kesser in a great way. He basically he says that it's a weight. The silence is not a permanent silence. If you notice, it's wait for me. Which means I'm going to talk later. Just right now, don't say anything. And the idea is that it's a preparation. Silence is not the goal. Silence, because what does silence basically represent? The speech is like action by HaShem, right? That's how there's like an is. There's a something. Silence is like sort of the essence. But by us, the purpose of creation is not to like reduce everything back to nothing. The purpose of creation is to bring the nothingness into the speech, like, right? In other words,
I think that starts with listening. Rabbi Sachs writes a lot about the still small voice that the prophet Eliyahu heard when he was in the cave. Even he had all the storms and everything came through, and then God was in the still small voice. It's about listening before the speech.
That's what I'm saying.
You have to hear people. You hear people, where people are coming from, have sensitivity to them. To talk about the Rabbi, he's talking a lot and stuff like that. All the work that you're missing out all the work that he did before that, before he got to that level. You're just seeing him as Superman, but all the work that led up to that, where he had the sensitivity to say the right thing to people, and so that people would respond in the right way.
So that's what I'm saying here, exactly. In other words, it's a weight. The goal is not silence. The goal is like, it's a temporary pause of preparation for something to come later. So I'm agreeing with you. In other words, that there's an inyan of silence, but it's not that that's the highest level. It's like you need to go silent so that you can speak.
Rabbos teach the tongue silence. Teach the lips silence.
Or the best thing for the body is silence. Is it saying anything like that?
Lo matzati tov leguf el shtika.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, what does it say?
First, I just have to add something here because maybe I'm not the right place for this. It says, Malchus is dalish, deles la migarma klum.
Right. For
So the taich that, what does that mean? It doesn't have from itself anything. That means it has from above. It has.
Right.
It has a ton of it, and it gives it. Malchus gives life.
Right.
So it's not the silent. It's not silent, but not silent.
Right. Yeah.
And it says lo matzati tov shtika.
Right.
The other way. I didn't hear anything for the goof from shtika.
Right. The goof.
The goof. It's not good. It's. I didn't find anything better to the goof.
Right.
Than shtika.
Right.
But you can say mishtika. I didn't find anything good for the goof from shtika.
Right. Yeah.
It was written like that.
Yeah. It's a good old. Yeah.
I guess that's what the Rabbi brought when he says HaShem Sfasai Tiftach Ufia Giti Lasecha. Right? He says he's supposed to have for davening for Shmon Esrei. It's Tefillah Richter Davening. And he's saying that you should be saying the words of God.
Right. From this year's Basi Lagani brings it out.
The same thing.
Totally. So that's basically it. That's what we're saying here. So I mean, again, even if you're going to say that there is an inyan of silence, it's a weight for me. It's not like a thing to itself. Because why? Because if it was like that, HaShem wouldn't have made the world. He doesn't want a dir b'tachtonim. Dir b'tachtonim means he wants a tachtonim. He wants all this speech, but he doesn't want it to be confused and crumbled and babbling. He doesn't want a Babylon. He wants a Yerushalayim. Okay. Anyway, that was just a little something from yesterday we were talking about. Going on. Oh, yeah.
There's this group of people in the East. They take a vow of silence, right? And I know this man. I saw. I totally disagree. He took a vow of silence for 40 years.
40.
Yeah, I met this guy. And what they do, they write on a board. So you ask them a question, but it's ridiculous. It's like what you said. if there's like tension inside, building up, what is good is being quiet. If you can't speak, about HaShem.
No? If you have worries, like there's something very, very therapeutic about speaking. Also, if you have worries, you have to speak them out. And speech, dafka. It's not enough to just like think it or even write it.
Right on the board is ridiculous in one sense because you still have that tension inside that's building up. It's if you're not peaceful inside, what's it good if you can try to externally control your tongue? It doesn't work because you're still like tension. So taking a vow of silence.
We have it also. Again, there is such a thing as a vow of silence in Torah, Tainus Dibor. And actually, dafka during these days, Shovavim, we're in like a few weeks here when people have certain customs to take vows of silence during this time. These are considered like days of...
Not to speak at all?
No, you have to daven.
These days?
These days are between Parshas Shemos and Parshas Mishpatim.
Really?
They're like days of din according to whatever. We don't really like talk about it in Chassidus. I've never seen it in any Sfarim of ours, but it's definitely. No, I'm saying, but when I say Sfarim of ours, I mean Rabbi Hossein and Nesienu.
No.
Never seen it, even though they're based upon the holy writings. Yeah, exactly. Like it's something that is a holy part of the Art Torah that's not shaykh to us so much, but those who are not reading Chassidus and so forth, they didn't know that. So there's people who are mamash getting into this. Like for example, you go to Sons in these days, they have like mamash public fast days that they all take upon themselves during these days, like every Thursday even. It's I think I don't think they do it at Sheni and Chamishi. They do it every Sheni and Chamishi. I think once a week they fast over there. And we had a guy in here on Shabbos who was in a Tanyas Dibur. That's why I brought it up. He was fasting with his speech. There is such a concept, but again, by us, it's a weight for me. Like it's not an inyan in and of itself that you're going to be silent for 40 years. It's an inyan to prepare. It's a preparation because the real what HaShem wants from our religion, is a dibur is the highest thing. It's just that it has to be filled not with poverty of the reish, but poverty of the dalid. So going on, Os Zayin. Hine klalus inyan abitul. The general concept of bittul, kasher im os yud. In generally, it's connected with the letter yud. V'kanal, and as we said earlier, that the yud represents the bittul. Shezeu achiluk ben os daled l'reish, and that's the difference between these two letters. The os daled yesh lo yud ma'acharav. The daled has a little yud behind it. Shemara bittul, which refers to its poverty of bittul specifically. And then he goes in and says, "This is gam hachiluk ben rav l'Rebbe." We find in the Gemara, there's Indian of a Rebbe and Rav. There's like there are a few different more levels. Like there's Rabban, and there's Rebbe, and there's Rav, and then there's just the name of a person. Sometimes you don't call him with any title, you just call him Abaya, Rava. All these things matter, and they mean something. They're indicating like where the person comes from, and the level, and the darga, and the generation that they're in, and so forth and so on. But he's Al Pi Kabbalah here. We're saying that there's a difference between Rav and Rebbe. That Rebbe is with a Tosefis Yud. It has an extra Yud, obviously, over Rav. Va'inyin bazeh. What does it mean? So hine Isa ma'akdam l'tikuni Zohar. It's brought in the Zohar. Kol Rav mi Bavel, v'kol Rebbe me'eretz Yisrael. So first and foremost, just a technical truth is that anytime you see the word Rav, it's talking about someone who's already after the destruction, the Korban of Beis HaMikdash, and they've already been exiled out of. So basically, Rav was the first of those people. Actually, Rebbe was the last one, and Rav was the first one. Rebbe speaks about this. There was like the original transfer from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel was between Rabbi Yehuda and Nasi. He was like the last Rebbe, and then Rav was the first Rebbe outside in Bavel. So Beis Rabbeinu Sheba Bavel, the famous concept that they brought down, that there's such a thing as like the house of our master in Bavel, which is the little Beis HaMikdash. The first one, Rashi says over there, what's Beis Rabbeinu Sheba Bavel? Beis Rav, right? Beis Medrash Shel Rav, because he was the first one that sort of brought the Beis HaMikdash into Chutz La'aretz. So Rebbe was the last and Rav was the first, and you can learn from them also. But everyone who's called Rebbe anything, he was living in Eretz Yisrael, and anyone who's called Rav anything is living in Bavel. So it says in the this is brought in the Zohar, and it's Mavur B'Kisvei Arizal in the Ari, basically commenting on the Zohar, if you will, in the Shar Maimari Rashbi, talking about the statements of the Rashbi there. Shebatzeiso Yizbarach Lachutz El Chutz La'aretz Bavel. So it says that the Indian is when God goes outside, i.e. Chutz La'aretz, he goes out of Eretz Yisrael into Bavel. He's a babbler. Harizeh al derech mashe kasuv hine avaya rochev. So I was telling you, it's a rechev, page rechev. Hine avaya rochev al av kal uba mitzrayim. So the Indian is the pasuk in Tanakh here that it says that when HaShem goes out of Israel, how does he get there? He rides on a thin cloud and comes to Egypt. Right?
That's awesome.
So the word is rochev al av kal uba mitzrayim, and he comes to Egypt. Going to Egypt obviously is out of Israel.
What's the word for cloud?
Kal is light.
Light cloud.
Light cloud. Hainu. That means to say, Shayetzil Mitzrayim ugvulim dechutz la'aretz. They're going out to Mitzrayim, and in general the boundaries of which are called chutz la'aretz. He lo b'chinas hashemos atzmam. He doesn't go out with the real names of Hashem. Yeah, you're going to have to wait for this one. He brings the punchline in a second, but just work with us. He says he doesn't go out with the true names of Hashem. Ela b'chinas hamiiloim shelahem. He only goes out with the fill-in, right? We talked about miiloi a little bit earlier, like the extra letters that spell the letter, right? Everyone knows what miiloi are. Yeah. Hashem only goes out with the miiloim when he goes chutz la'aretz. What is it? Where did you get that from? That Hainu al yedei rochav umislavish b'bechinas avkal. Meaning what? Going into a state of miiloi versus the actual name itself is indicated by these words that he's riding, i.e. dressing up in. Riding means he's like kind of going inside of. The level called avkal, which you see that he puts with parentheses, not parentheses, what do you call that? Quotations, meaning it's really, those two words are indicating something else entirely. It's not just a light cloud, it's some kind of a gematria situation going on there. And what is it going to indicate, this light cloud? It's not a light cloud, kind of like a nice little light cloud going through the sky, what do you call those? But, ciliolus or something, what are the words for light clouds? Not important. But rather, avkal is like this, is this indication of going into miiloim version versus regular name version.
I don't understand what this miiloi version is.
Okay, the miiloi, we already said, what is the miiloi of a thing?
99.
Huh?
He says the miiloi in 99.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 99.
What does it mean?
Yeah, go down to footnote 99, right?
Yeah.
So you see like Yud K Vav K?
Oh, that is all spelled out, you're saying?
Yeah, like the miiloi is the letters which are not Yud K Vav K. It's the other letters, the filling in letters.
Oh, okay.
Like, for example, Vav Dalet in a Yud, it's called the miiloi.
Okay, so when Yud's all spelled out?
Well, that's the gematria of the spelled out equals the
whole thing.
Gematria when it's also the Yud is spelled out?
Yeah, when you spell out the whole Yud K Vav K in with its miiloi, not just Yud K Vav K 26.
Like when you spell out every letter.
When you spell out every letter and you add up that gematria, let's say, that he says over here in footnote number 99, it comes to the gematria Av.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he doesn't go out with the name themselves.
Yeah.
He goes out with, which the name itself would not be gematria 72, it would be gematria 26. And we're saying that would be like a higher thing. So right now we're saying that the miiloi of something is like a step down.
Okay.
All right? So he doesn't go out straight with the names as they are. He goes out with their miiloim. That contraction is how he goes out into, so to speak, chutz la'aretz. He can't get to chutz la'aretz with the same level of power that he has in Eretz Yisrael, so he has to contract himself, and therefore he only goes out with his miiloim.
Why would miiloim be a contraction?
He says it's not like that, though.
No, where? Where do you see that?
He says it's not like that.
I don't think so.
He says it's not like that. He says Yud K, Vav, Yud K, Vav.
No, he brings that also. That's a further thing. That's kal. So anyway...
Wait, why would it be a contraction?
Well, he's going to explain, but I'll tell you now if you want. Because basically, when you have... He'll explain it inside, but it's already on the topic. He's saying that Can anyone actually figure it out on their own? I mean, it is something quite logical, but it's deep. Why all of a sudden you spell out the letter?
Yeah.
Is it considered a down,
Right.
going down, a contraction from just having the pure letter itself?
Exactly.
Anyone have any ideas about that?
There's issues whether there can be full reception of prophecy outside of Israel, whether God can fully reveal his true name.
Okay, so we're saying, there is definitely going down. But the question is, why is spelling the letter have to be a going down? Maybe you think spelling is better. You have the whole letter.
Get more letters.
Is it more concealed?
Is it more concealed? I would say it is on the contrary, it's somewhat more revealed. When you look at a yud, in a certain sense, that's not like really what you're getting. It's really 3 letters.
But yud is the essence.
Yud is the essence, so that's where we're getting.
The only
there.
thing I can think of maybe is when you spell it out, you're like making it more like it's more compacted when it's like a yud, and when you're spelling it out, it's like making itself thinner.
Exactly. So let's put it in a simple language.
Another
Yeah.
way to do it.
Huh?
Very simple, obvious thing.
Yeah.
is A hey can be spelled 3 different ways.
Okay.
So when you're spelling it a certain way, you're losing the other 2 ways.
Also.
So when you have it in Pashut, it's not this. It includes everything. But when you don't have it like that, it's not including everything anymore. It's one of 4 different ways. Well,
Yeah.
There's actually more than 4, but the main 4.
Yeah. The Rebbe gives an example. That's a good example. The Rebbe gives an example that when do you even ever get into associating yourself with the miiloi is only when you say the letter, right? Because when you think the letter or when you write the letter, you don't need any other letters to indicate what that is. The yud in your mind is just one letter. But when you say it, dafka, you say dalid. When you say a yud, you say yud, right? When you say vais, you say s, right? So these other letters that are in the miiloi of the letter, that they only come out when you take it basically from thought to speech. They don't exist in the level of thought. You don't need it. So you see that those things only present themselves basically when you go down a level. The miiloi is a product of descending. So that's the idea behind it. And therefore when Hashem goes out into the chutz la'aretz, suddenly he's like revealing, he's going from like his pristine concealed state as it is like in machshava, and he's bringing it down a level into dibur, and therefore it comes out as a miiloi. It doesn't come out pure, it comes out spelled. And that's why all of a sudden he's riding on Av Kal. We're going to see that in a second, what that exactly means. And he says, what is this Av Kal? He says, Zeu acharayim d'shem avaya pashut, Av, umale ba'alafim, Kal, k'de'isa be'etz chaim. So this itself requires a little interesting explanation. So he says that what are these letters or this words, Av Kal, a light cloud, what are they really symbolizing to us? So he says it's called the acharayim of the name Havaya Pashut. Okay, what is the acharayim of the name Havaya Pashut? Basically, he's saying that. Well, he's going to explain actually in a second what that really means. Umale ba'alafim, and when it's so Shem Havaya Pashut is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Pashut means there's no miiloi, and Male ba'alafim, right, means filled with olives, means it's a certain type of miiloi, because as the rabbi was saying here, there's not just one way of spelling a hey, for example. And we have this concept of, there's really 12 ways of spelling Shem Havaya. But in general, when you add in all the miiloim, but in general we talk about the 4 biggies, which is Av, Sag, Ma, and Ban, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about that many times.
Right.
And so basically the reason that you come to those particular gematrias is when you fill in the extra letters with certain choices and options of miiloi. So for example, just to get right to our point, the name Ma, which spells 45 in gematria, you arrive at it, at that number, by every chance you get to use an aleph to spell the word. Like for example, he just mentioned that hey can be spelled 3 different ways. So you could, we're going to choose alephs at every juncture. And the same is true with a vav. No, the vav doesn't have an aleph. Just the aleph, basically, just the hey.
Ma does have
In the ma, yeah, it has an aleph, huh? Vav, aleph, vav. Okay, so then basically every chance we get to spell a letter with a vav, because also a vav can be spelled in a few different ways. It can be spelled just vav vav. It can be spelled vav yud vav, and it can be spelled vav aleph vav. So again, when we're gonna sort of try and stay consistent. So let's just say we're gonna spell Hashem's name only with the alephs. it's going to come out to 45 in Gematria, and that's called Shema, and that's called Mali Alafin. That's called the name God when the miiloi is only choosing aleph as opposed to any of your other options.
Are you saying that in Hashem's name, instead of writing a vav, you write an aleph?
No, not instead of a vav, but how do you spell
You spell out
vav?
the vav?
You spell the vav. You can
Okay.
spell, one of the ways of spelling vav
With the
is
aleph.
vav aleph vav.
I got it.
So you choose the aleph option every time, and you wind up with a 45 gematria.
Gotcha.
Where you been, buddy? Talking about spiritual stuff.
By the
All
way,
right.
it's funny that the mimer isn't saying that dibor is a lower than shtikha, than silence. Isn't that what we just said?
We're saying that when you go out, yeah, definitely. But again,
Where it's
there's
like-
different levels. In other words, certainly, olam hazeh
Yeah.
and chutz la'aretz is a contraction. The hishtalshelus is an inyan of dibur. But what? Ultimately, in the time to come,
One.
right? There's not going to be Eretz Yisrael. It's still going to be the lands of Eretz Yisrael, but even chutz la'aretz is going to raise up. So in other words, we're talking about like the ultimate concept is that there's no denying that dibur is below thought, speech is below thought. There's no
Yeah.
denying that. But in the panemius of the inyan, just a throwback to our previous conversation, not to get confused, is that we're going to get to a state where the dibur is elevated to the place of thought, right? That's like kind of the whole philosophy of Yiddishkeit. Of course, the world is a lowly place, but Hashem was a dira and dafke in the lower place, not in the higher place. So
Right.
that's just what I'm saying. In the ultimate conversation,
holy-
we're not like meditators in silence per se.
Right. We're like
That's not-
holy speakers.
Right, exactly. But anyway, 100% speech is a descent, so that's why we're not babblers, right?
not babblers.
You can't just speak. It has to be like God's speech.
Holy speaker.
So there is an Indian of silence, of course. That's what we're saying. It's the highest
Yeah.
thing, but it's just a preparation, as Aleph was saying. Nice, Aleph, you got it there. As Aleph was saying, we're talking about the Alafin. So this is your Shema over here. So anyway,
So why
let's go.
Why is it not that Hashem? Why is it not even greater that Hashem is lowering Himself even more to go out?
It would be. It's just that, as he said, there's no prophecy out there. In other words, the descent starts off as a negative in order to be elevated. So when Hashem goes out there, we're talking about how he sort of like exits the Kodesh into the Chol. So even though ultimately the Chol is like the goal of all of life, and we're like sent into the Chol to elevate it, and that's the whole purpose of everything, but nonetheless, the initial descent over there is a descent,
Right.
right?
Like the book of Daniel, which is
But that's the goal. We're
The
supposed
goal
to,
is to elevate
We're
it.
supposed to bring Egypt up to.
Agreed.
to
Agreed.
Yerushalayim.
And Hashem does it because the word Anochi, the beginning of all Torah, is an Egyptian word that he points out. Like Hashem brought Egypt up into like putting it right into the Torah, and the highest, most the Aleph of the Torah is fine. But first, before he did that, he had to go down in order to get there. Right? He makes a.
in the book of Daniel. It's sort of it comes through in dreams. It comes through that lens. He doesn't receive a full prophecy.
Right.
And they managed to take some of the vessels of the Basi Lagani, and it causes like mad visions. Like this hand appears and writes things on the walls. It's not a regular
Right.
type of prophecy.
It's also in Aramaic, the whole book.
Yeah.
But at the same time, from there we learn about the Inyan of Mashiach, and that's what I'm saying. Like from the darkness comes the highest light. But yeah.
What about what the exception by Chesed in the well? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
By a festival, so he gets the
With electricity.
You're saying Chutz La'aretz.
Yeah, Chutz La'aretz. But even that's connected, like
Listen.
connected
It was a different level of voice. That's not a problem.
Yeah, we're not. I mean, the Rabbi came along and explained that when it says that Nevuah, so to speak, stopped from the Jewish people, Ruach HaKodesh stopped from the Jewish people, he explains in a kind of classic mimer that that's not really true. In other words, a certain revealed state of Nevuah. But you see all through the texts of the writings of all the generations, there were people that could mamash raise the dead, and there was clearly like prophets going through the whole time. They just like called themselves by a different name, or as you said, they maybe had a different level of prophecy. Although that's not necessarily indicated that this is a Kamoni Mamish. Like there's going to be a man that rises like Moshe in every generation, but he didn't always, show himself so clearly. Certainly, he just like God sort of played himself down. The prophets also played themselves down to a certain degree when they went out.
They're just called crazy now.
They were always called crazy. Now, let's try. Are we going to get through this? Let's try and get through this concept real quick. Yeah, we have 3 minutes. So anyway, well, we can do something. So he says like this. So what does it mean that Hashem is riding on this thin cloud? What does the thin cloud really mean? So all we know right now is it means a contraction. But how does that come out of the words Av, Kal? So he says, first of all, this is called the Av and Kal are two different things. One is the, quote, Acharayim of the Shem Havaya Pashut. One is the backside of the simple name Hashem, which is just Yud Kei Vav Kei. And one is the Acharayim of the Shem Hashem, when it's Male Alafim, when it's filled with Aleph, which is, we already know, you're spelling the whole name out and choosing Aleph every chance you get, as it's brought in the Eitz Chaim. But what does that mean? So Perush HaDevarim, I just think this is really cool. I want to fit it into this class here. The meaning of this, Hine Mispar Av Kan, usually when we say the Shem Av, ayin base, we mean that like spelling out all the letters. When you add a yud instead of an aleph, you add a yud.
In 99, just look 99.
99 is, yeah, okay, 99, fine. 99, you see the name of Hashem spelled out. Every time you have a hey there, it's spelled hey yud. You see the vav, vav yud vav. The hey again is with a yud. So instead of what I just said before regarding alephs, they choose a yud, and that's the highest level of Hashem. So yud is the highest of the gematrias of all the ones you can choose. It's 10, and so it makes the number the biggest. And basically, you wind up with the biggest name of Hashem. So he says here, when it says the Shem Av, that's not what we mean. And he has to clarify that because we almost exclusively talk about that Shem Av. This is a different Shem Av. Eino Shem Av, Shua Gematria de Shem Havaya. It's not the name Av, which is the Gematria of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, Kafi Shu Be'iloi Shelo, as it is in its highest pristine state, which is B'miloi Yudin, which is when you add Yuds every chance you get. It's not that. Elohu mispar achure the Shem Havaya. It's what we call the number of the backside of the name Havaya, right? Which is what? That's why he says he says over there the Acharayim the Shem Havaya. What is the Acharayim the Shem Havaya? That's not the Shem Av. The Shem Av is like the highest, wondrous point of the Shem Havaya, not the backside of the Shem. What's the backside of the Shem Havaya? Hainu shetechila monim yud. V'achar kach mosifim umonim yud kei, v'achar kach yud kei vav, v'achar kach yud kei vav kei. So again, in short, how do you get to 72 in this way? First you add yud, then you add, which is 10, then you add to the 10 yud kei, which is 15, you come to 25, then you add to the 15 yud kei vav, which is whatever, and you add to that to 25, and then you add yud kei vav kei to the whole thing, and you wind up with 72. That's called the backside of the Shem Havaya. It's a completely different way of arriving at the number 72. It has nothing to do with the pristine level, what we normally call a Shem Av. So that's called basically that's a contraction. The Shem Av with its miiloi is not necessarily considered usually a low thing. Here, this is considered like a backside of the Shem Havaya. And then that comes to 72. He said, but Tziruv Kulam Olav Mispar Ayin Base. When you add them all together, it comes to 72. Kamo Kain Mispar Kal. So that's Av, that's the cloud. What about Kal? So Mispar Kal Hu Acharayim D'Shem Havaya B'miloi Alafim. So he says the Kal, which is much bigger than 72, it's 130. This is the same story as that. You're adding one letter to the next, but it's when you're also doing it in such a way that it's with miiloi alafim. Look at footnote 100, and he spells it out for you literally, right?
Whoa.
It's much longer of a little equation here. Yeah. Yud is yud, but then you have yud. How do you spell basically? What is you have yud? First, you're going to go yud, and then you're going to spell yud k, and then yud k vav, and then yud k vav k. But when you get to yud the first time, it's not just one letter anymore. It's yud vav dalit. It's already 20 instead of 10.
Yeah.
And then when you get to Yud K, you're not just spelling K as a Yud and a K. You're spelling Yud spelled out and Hey spelled out, and specifically spelled out with Alephs. Right? So then you wind up with a much bigger number. It's already, instead of just 10 plus 15, it's 20 plus 26. Yeah?
Okay.
And you continue this, then you spell Yud K Vav, and all in their spelled out version, and then Yud K Vav K, all in their spelled out version. You're adding one letter to the next. And that comes out to 130. And that's called Av Kal. In other words, we're dealing with there is like Hashem, when he rides out to the foreign countries, he rides out on this like strange backside version of Havaya. It's not the straight names as they are. It's the Acharei Havaya and two levels of Acharei Havaya. Acharei Havaya straight, which is just Yud K Vav K spelled in that way, and Acharei Havaya when it's filled in with Alephs, which is Yud Kei Vav Kei spelled out with olives and then one letter added to the next. So it comes out to the gematria of 72 and 130. And this is considered like this great contraction, which is how he finds himself in Chutz La'aretz. All right, we'll hold here. We'll finish this up, obviously.
Why is he saying this?
Sunday.
Because he's saying that
Thank you for
Oh, this is this?
learning that.
Okay,
Tell
great.
you how far the Yerida goes.
he's saying this because he's speaking all this out. Is that what's going on?
He's trying to explain that there's the difference between Rebbe and Rav. Remember?
Oh.
And he's saying the Rebbe is in Eretz Yisrael, Rav is in Chutz La'aretz.
Okay.
So then he starts to explain what's the difference between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. That when Hashem goes to Chutz La'aretz, he changes his way of like being from being basically the regular name Havaya as he is to being the behind version of the name Havaya, the back end of the name Havaya, which is essentially not the name Havaya as is. It's like this strange spelling of the name Havaya, which is sort of conceals it to some degree.
Why would Hashem conceal himself going to Eretz Yisrael?
No, to outside of Eretz Yisrael is when he conceals
outside
himself.
Israel.
Yeah. When he goes to Mitzrayim, he rides on this Avkal. He rides on this thin cloud, which is really these like funky gematrias.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Everything's like made from words, so he's like writing on the words.
He's carried instead of how as he is. He's carried in the words.
Ah.
In other words, as he is in Eretz Yisrael, he's just Yud Kei Vav Kei, straight. He's the name. Over there, he's not the name. He's like this like hidden version of the name, and then a second level of the hidden version of the Av is already a hidden version of the name Havaya, but Kal is already a hidden version of the miiloi of the Shem Havaya. It's even like lower.
Ah. Wow.
Yeah.
And that affects like how he operates in the world.
Yeah, he's concealed. It's like